I'm aware that lives are one of the most highly debated topics in modern video game discourse, but I do find it really interesting. They've been a standard of games ever since the arcades. How did companies grab people's attention to the point where they would continue loading money into the machine just to beat one level? Well, they gave arcade games simple yet addictive gameplay loops that would be understandable to the masses, so people of all age groups could get in on the fun. The trick to making people spend their entire paychecks on these machines though was difficulty. Arcade and console games from this era had significant difficulty spikes to encourage the player to spend more money and overcome challenges. The replayability during this time came from bashing your head into a wall to overcome unfairness. Now that lives have become an almost essential mechanic in games since the 80s, some believe that we should trade this so-called outdated trait for accessibility. Why is that? Well, let's have a look at both sides of the argument here. The main reason that I see online for people disliking lives is that they're, like I said, an element of arcade game design. However, when consoles started being phased back in during the 80s, developers would still include a life system in games, but for a different reason. Since it only costed a quarter for a play session at the arcade, some consumers were thrown off by home console games costing around $60, which is understandable at first glance. This is back when people treated video games as toys instead of a giant of entertainment, so people were more comfortable with spending a little every now and again to play for a few minutes, instead of spending way more to own an experience they could easily play something similar to in the arcade. How do you make people feel like they're getting their money's worth then? Simple, fill the games with unfair design that forces them to repeat the same sections over. That way, the player will get more time out of the game, making their purchase feel justified. I think it's safe to say that this is a very bad way to handle length in a game. But seriously, go back to any game on the NES and you'll most likely find this DNA somewhere. An example that I'd immediately jump to are Mega Man 1 through 6. Some people will call me impatient, and I probably am, but the trial and error present in these games are very evident of a desire to pad the game out. So while lives did remain once the hype for arcades had died down a little bit in favour of consoles, I personally don't believe that they only had purpose in arcades, because some people frankly just enjoy a challenge. But what if you don't want a challenge and just want a more forgiving experience without sacrificing the core of the game's design? It can be annoying to be forced to repeat a section that you've proved you can already beat after repeatedly dying to one obstacle over and over again. A recent example of this that I've seen was in last year's Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Now, I didn't bother playing Wonder past the credits, so I can't speak through personal experience here, but the final level in the special world was essentially a gauntlet of badge challenges with infrequent checkpoints, and my friends were conflicted on whether it was a good design choice to force players to do everything in one big go. I got involved too, and while I now heavily disagree with this statement specifically, I do think that Wonder took an interesting approach by forcing a life system onto players when you consider that the last major Mario platformer, that being Odyssey, didn't have a life system at all, but still discouraged deaths by having the player lose 10 coins instead of a life. I think that this was a great way to rethink the life system, because the player is still punished for messing up, but coins are easy to come by, so it's just a minor inconvenience. And with the game's emphasis on using your coins to buy costumes, it adds even more to this approach. Now, these are two very different games. One is a 3D collectathon platformer, and the other is a 2D course clear platformer. And there are arguments to be made relating to how Wonder should have included lives to be more faithful to the games it's trying to follow up from. But seemingly as soon as Nintendo decided to remove a system that many people didn't like, they reverted that decision for the next game. It's quite jarring, especially because we got a game in 2020 that I think perfected this new approach to life system in games, that being Crash Bandicoot 4. Crash 4 features a modern mode and a retro mode. The former removes lives entirely and replaces them with golden Wumpas that are worth 25 Wumpa fruit, and the latter has a life system identical to the original trilogy. I think that this is the perfect template that all modern games should follow if a life system is being considered, because it satisfies both parties. Casual players can experience the same level design that still rewards them for finding secrets in the form of more fruit, which can be put towards more gems, while hardcore Crash fans can unleash their true masochistic tendencies like in Crash 1. As a very experienced Crash player, I'll happily admit that I played on modern mode for all of my 3 playthroughs, and I can see this addition getting so many people into Crash, since the first 3 games aren't too accessible in their original states, especially that first game. In reality, a lot of AAA games today simply don't suit a life system. Online multiplayer has continued to grow since the 6th generation, and single player games, barring indies, have been putting more focus on spectacle and scripting first and foremost, rather than gameplay. While that's a topic for another day, it's important to highlight that this is a fair supporting argument for those who think lives are outdated. Mainstream games have simply evolved a lot, and in my honest opinion, most modern games, even ones that retain core parts of the game's design philosophies used in the 80s, have simply evolved past necessitating a life system, and I think that roguelikes are perfect proof of this. This year, roguelikes have become a bit of an obsession of mine, as I think they do a great job modernising old design philosophies while not betraying challenge and replayability, and also proving that games that share design elements with classic games don't need to use a life system. Roguelikes are one of the most replayable genres out there, as they found themselves on each playthrough, or run, being unique, since the environments, loot and enemies that you encounter are all randomised. And there are very few games in this genre where a single run will take you over an hour. While luck does play a role in your run, skill and experience can often override this. Let me use my favourite roguelike as an example of this. Learning the attack patterns of enemies and learning how to use each shot type and item effectively is a testament to a reliance on replayability and knowledge. This essentially makes roguelikes into a sort of reimagining of arcade difficulty. While most of them are still very challenging and rely on the player dying a few times to learn the lay of the land, buffs and choices are handed out to the player constantly to get them thinking and switch up their playstyle, and the removal of a traditional life system is proof that this design philosophy still works. Sure, some of these games do have rare items that can act as extra lives. The Binding of Isaac has the Ankh, which will respawn you with 3 soul hearts when you would normally die, which differ from regular hearts in that they can't be restored, and Slay the Spire has the Fairy in a Bottle, which allows you to come back with 30% of your max HP upon death. However, I think that these are unique twists on the traditional extra life, to where their inclusions are more worthwhile, since they don't just provide a free pass for sloppy play. They might be forgiving to some degree, but they still come at a cost that forces the player to be more careful and strategic. This pursuit of memorization and perfection, along with each of your runs being relatively short and infinitely varied, is what I think makes roguelikes as a concept the perfection of this old school game design philosophy, and living proof that games designed with challenge and replayability in mind don't need a life system. In conclusion, I personally think that lives are stuck in a strange place. I don't agree with the mindset that they should be entirely abolished, since some players want to preserve the feel of older games, but I also think that forcing them with no accessibility options in this day and age is a bit of a problem. Ideally, games should strive to use Crash 4 as an example, since it strikes a perfect balance between both sides and allows for new fans to be made, while still giving old fans the chance to play the game as if it was the original trilogy. I think that it's the best way you can go about handling this issue, and I have a lot of respect for this design choice. Thank you for watching this different style of video. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that I was able to give a valid view of this argument and present my points well. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.